You know how every neighborhood has that one neighbor? The one who seems born to patrol the block, clutch the HOA rulebook like it's scripture, and glare at you as though joy is some sort of crime. Yeah, ours was Greg. And he decided the day we moved in that his personal crusade was going to be my classic Mustang. But what he didn't expect was my secret weapon. My grandmother. Let me back it up to the beginning. When Rachel and I bought the house, it felt like we'd finally crossed the invisible line between surviving and actually living. After years, cooped up in tiny apartments where we could hear our neighbors sneeze through the walls, suddenly we had breathing room, our own driveway, a garage, and a place where we could plant more than one potted fern without running out of space. It was a picturesque suburban bubble. The kind of place where the loudest drama was someone's recycling bin tipping over, or whether the holiday lights stayed up a week too long. Perfect. Or, at least, it looked that way at first glance. The highlight for me was obvious, my 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback. That car wasn't just steel and paint. It was years of scraped knuckles, careful restoring, and more love than I'd ever poured into anything tangible. Every bolt and fender had its story. The deep green paint shimmered just right under the sun. The chrome reflected my stubborn obsession, and under the hood sat a 302 cubic inch V8 that I had rebuilt piece by piece. A real beast with history, power, and a voice that could shake the ground. So, naturally, that first weekend, I opened the garage, took a deep breath of oil and leather, and turned the key. The Mustang awakened with a roar. Low, thunderous, guttural. Music to me. The kind of rumble that vibrates through your ribs and makes your pulse race. I sat there grinning like a fool, feathering the throttle, letting years of labor come alive. But across the street, Greg wasn't hearing music. He was hearing murder. There he was, arms folded, jaw tight, his face twisted into an expression so sour it could curdle milk. At first I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was surprised, maybe a little startled. But when I rolled the Mustang out for a short spin down the block, he didn't move an inch. Just stood there, watching with increasing disapproval, like I'd personally offended his azaleas. By the time I eased back into the drive, he was waiting, hands on his hips. Sheriff Greg, ready to hand out citations. "Hey," he snapped. "Mind keeping that thing down? Some of us enjoy peace and quiet." Thrown, I raised my hands slightly. "Sorry, didn't mean to disturb anyone. Just tuning her up." He didn't ease off. Instead, he gave a little scoff and jabbed me with his tone. "Maybe you should think about something modern. Something that fits the neighborhood." I bit the inside of my cheek. "I'll keep that in mind," I said flatly, parking the Mustang, trying to shake off the bad omen his words planted. Rachel, perched on the porch with crossed arms, raised an eyebrow as I walked back. What was that about? I sighed. We just met the HOA police. What I didn't realize then was that Greg wasn't going to let this go. He was snuffing out whatever joy we dared show in my Mustang. That was target number one. The very next morning, a thick white envelope arrived in the mail. Neat HOA letterhead glaring up at me. My stomach sank before I even tore it open. But I was right. A formal noise complaint against my Mustang for disturbing the peace. If nothing changed, there'd be fines. Further action. Rachel glanced at me over her coffee. "Let me guess," she said dryly. "Greg." I held up the letter. "Who else?" This wasn't just neighborly annoyance. It was targeted. He'd filed paperwork on me almost instantly. That wasn't just keep the peace. Greg was putting me on his hit list. And so, I confronted him. Found him watering his surgically trimmed lawn, smug before I even opened my mouth. "Morning," I said evenly. "Got the HOA letter. Noise complaint. That from you?" He set the hose down, arms crossing. "Yeah, that was me. Nothing personal. Just trying to keep the neighborhood quiet." My teeth ground together. "A heads up would have been nice before you went running to the HOA. He smirked. "Would it have changed anything?" My jaw flexed. "It's not like I sit there revving at midnight. It's a hobby, that's all." Greg nodded slowly, pretending to listen, then tilted his head. "A hobby, huh? Shame." The word hung between us. "Shame?" I repeated. "Well, I've been restoring cars for years," he said, puffing his chest. Real classics. And it's just a waste seeing that Mustang in the hands of somebody who doesn't understand how we do things here. My jaw tightened. Excuse me? He stepped in closer, dropping his voice. Let's be honest. That car isn't neighbor-friendly. If it were mine, I'd keep it out of sight. Out of the way. Out of respect. And there it was. If it were mine. He didn't just hate the car. He wanted it. I laughed coldly. So let me guess. You'd be willing to take it off my hands? Solve this little HOA drama for me? He spread his arms all innocent. Hey, just saying. If you ever get tired of ruffling feathers, I might know a guy who'd make a fair offer. My fists clenched. This wasn't about noise. This was a setup. Push me hard enough and I'd fold, sell to Greg for a deal. I leaned in, smirk sharp as a blade. Appreciate the offer. But this car isn't going anywhere. For the first time, the mask cracked. His jaw twitched. Suit yourself, he muttered. Then, back to watering like I'd been dismissed. Just so you know, the HOA doesn't take kindly to rule breakers. Rachel was waiting on the porch as I returned, reading my face like a book. That bad? Worse, I said grimly. He wants the car. Her head jerked up. You're serious? Dead serious, I muttered, glancing over my shoulder. And I've got a feeling he's just getting started. And sure enough, a few days later, my Mustang's lock was tampered with. Scratches fresh and obvious around the garage door. My gut nodded. Not a coincidence. When I told Rachel, her eyes widened. You think it was Greg? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew. So that night I set up a motion-activated camera pointed right at the garage. If Greg was bold once, he'd be bold twice, and I was right. 2 nights later, 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Groggy, I checked it. Motion detected in driveway. My heart hammered as I pulled up the feed, and there he was. Greg, creeping toward my garage with a crowbar clutched in his hand. My blood hit a boiling point. But then, another shape stepped into frame, and my jaw dropped. Grandma, of course, 75 years old, wrapped in her bathrobe, slippers on, wooden baseball bat in hand. She must have gotten the shared alert too. But instead of staying inside, like any rational human, Grandma marched right into battle. The footage was perfect. Greg fiddling with my lock, then freezing as the unmistakable tap of a bat touched his shoulder. He turned, and the color drained from his face. Can I help you, sweetheart? Grandma asked, voice sweet as honey, sarcasm dripping like poisoned sugar. Greg stammered. I was just what? Grandma cut him off, knuckles white on the bat, eyes sharp enough to turn stone into dust. And that's when things started to get really interesting. Just breaking into my grandson's garage, just messing with his car. Greg opened his mouth to protest, but Grandma wasn't done. Let me tell you something, you little weasel, she snapped. I've seen a lot of punks in my life, but you're not even good at being one. What were you gonna do, huh? Steal the car and tell the HOA you were rescuing it. Greg took another step back, clearly realizing he'd severely underestimated the situation. I wasn't... Oh, save it, Grandma barked. I don't want to hear whatever pathetic excuse you're about to make. Then she did something that nearly made him spit out my coffee when I watched the footage. Later she raised the bat and took a solid swing at his knee, Greg yelped, and fell on his backside, scrambling to crawl away. Next time I see you near this house. Grandma warned I won't aim for the knee. Greg didn't wait around to see if she was bluffing. He practically sprinted back across the street, tripping over his own feet in his panic. Grandma stood there for a moment, bat resting on her shoulder, watching him disappear into his house. Then without missing a beat, she turned and knocked, twice on the garage door. You can come out now. She called Rachel, and I stepped outside. Still in shock. Grandma, I breathed. What the hell was that? She grinned. That was an old-fashioned attitude adjustment. I stared at her, then glanced at Rachel, who was trying not to burst out laughing. You hit him? I asked. Grandma shrugged. Didn't hit him. Hard, just enough to remind him who he's messing with. Rachel covered her mouth, barely suppressing a laugh. Greg's never going to live that down. I shook my head in disbelief, but I couldn't help but smile. You know, he's probably going to call the HOA on us again, right? Grandma, expression turned mischievous. Let him, he won't get far. And she was right, because the next morning Greg went to the HOA with a brand new complaint. And it completely backfired on him the next morning as I sipped my coffee on the porch. I saw Greg marching straight toward the HOA office, his limp just barely noticeable after Grandma's attitude adjustment. The night before, Rachel, watching beside me, nudged my arm. "You think he's going to report the incident?" I smirked. "Oh, absolutely. But the real question is, will anyone believe?" Him, Greg, had been gunning for me since day one. And I had no doubt he was about to pull every HOA string he had to get revenge. Sure enough, later that afternoon, another letter arrived in the mailbox. This time, not just a noise complaint, Butan official, notice demanding an inspection of my property. According to the letter, my Mustang was now considered a nuisance vehicle under the HOA bylaws, and failure to comply could result in mandatory removal. I clenched my jaw, rage bubbling up inside me. "He's not just trying to get me fined," I muttered. "He's trying to take my car." Rachel's eyes widened as she read over my shoulder. "Can't they even do that?" I gritted my teeth. "Not legally. But Greg clearly thought he could get away with it." And that's when I decided to fight back. That night, I stayed up digging through every HOA rulebook, every legal document, looking for a way to prove this was nothing but Greg abusing his authority. What I found a gold mine first. The HOA had no right to classify a vehicle as a nuisance. Unless it was abandoned or inoperable, my Mustang was neither. Second, the bylaws specifically stated that only the HOA board as a whole could make that decision. Not a single bitter, limping man with a vendetta. And finally, Greg wasn't even an HOA board member anymore. He'd been removed 2 years ago for excessive complaints and trying to enforce rules that didn't exist. I nearly laughed out loud. Greg had zero authority. He had been banking on me, not doing my research, thinking I'd just roll over and comply. The next morning, I showed up at the HO office with my legal findings. The woman at the desk, Sandra, according to her name tag, looked up in surprise. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said, slapping the HOA rulebook onto the counter. "I'd like to talk about this so-called nuisance vehicle claim." Her brows furrowed as she skimmed the notice, then my highlighted sections as she read, her frown deeper. Finally, she sighed. "I see what's happening here. Do you?" I asked, crossing my arms, "because it seems like Greg is out here playing judge, jury, and executioner." Sandra rubbed her temples. "I'll be honest with you. Greg's been a problem for years. He likes to interpret rules in his own way. We've been trying to keep him out of HOA affairs, but he still manages to stick his nose in everything." "So you're telling me this notice is bogus?" I asked. Sandra sighed. "Technically, yes. It never should have been issued. Then I want it revoked." She nodded. "Consider it done." I grinned. But before I could thank her, the office door swung open, Greg storming in like he owned the place. The moment he saw me, his face twisted in fury. He barked, "What the hell are you doing here?" I turned to him, completely unfazed. "Oh, just proving that your complaint is total BS." Greg's eyes darted to Sandra, who was stamping void on the notice. His face turned red. "What? No, he's breaking HOA regulations. That car is perfectly within legal limits." Sandra interrupted coolly. "And you, Greg, have no authority to enforce anything." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "But boo, it's too loud. It doesn't fit the neighborhood." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "The bylaws say nothing about vehicle aesthetics." Greg's face twisted with rage. "So that's it. You're just going to let them get away with this?" "Get away with what?" I smirked, owning a car. Greg's hands balled into fists, but he had no comeback. Finally, with an incoherent sputter, he stormed out of the office, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. Sandra sighed. "I swear that man is going to give me gray hair." I laughed. "Well, at least now he knows he can't bully people into giving up their cars." She nodded. "If he keeps harassing you, let me know. We've been meaning to take further action against him." As I walked out of the office, I felt victorious. Greg had been humiliated and, best of all, he had lost. But I had a feeling he wasn't done yet, and I was right. Because the next move he made, it involved the entire HOA board. And that was when my grandma stepped in, a few days after Greg's failed attempt to get my Mustang removed. Got another letter from the HOA this time. It wasn't just a complaint, it was a summons to an official board meeting. According to the notice, my presence was required to discuss multiple community violations and behavior that disrupts the integrity of the HOA. I let out a dry laugh. "Disrupts the integrity? Greg's the one sneaking around at night with a crowbar." Rachel frowned as she read over my shoulder. "This isn't about rules anymore. He's just trying to get back at you." I sighed fine, if he wants a fight. I'll give him one before I could plan my defense. Grandma shut. Her book stood up and stretched. Oh, you're not going alone, she said matter-of-factly. I'm coming with you. I blinked. Grandma, it's just an HOA meeting. And I'm just a little old lady, she cut in. Now are you going to argue with me, or are we going to handle this? The night of the meeting we walked into, the HOA clubhouse. The room was packed. Greg sat at the front looking far too smug, surrounded by stacks of printed documents the moment he saw Grandma. Heist's expression faltered. We took our seats. As Linda, the HOA president, called them, meeting to order. We're here to discuss an ongoing complaint about a loud and disruptive vehicle, she began. Greg shot to his feet. Yes, this car has been a nuisance breaking. Multiple community rules, and despite my repeated attempts to resolve it peacefully, the owner has been openly defiant. I opened my mouth to respond, but Grandma beat me to it. She leaned forward, resting her hands over her cane, and by peacefully you, mean filing. Both complaints sneaking into his garage at night and getting humiliated in the process. The room fell dead silent. Greg turned red. I never. Oh, don't bother denying it. Grandma interrupted because I have the security footage right here. I held up my phone. The video of Greg lurking near my garage paused perfectly on his guilty face. Gasps filled the room. Even the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Greg, now panicked, looked to Linda. For support. Look. That's not why we're here. The issue is the Mustang. It violates HOA policy. Grandma raised an eyebrow. Does it? Yes, he snapped. Loud jeans disrupt the neighborhood, and which bylaw states that? She asked sweetly. Greg hesitated it. It's under community harmony and nope. I cut in, flipping through the actual HOA handbook. I read every page, nothing about classic cars, nothing about noise levels, unless it exceeds legal limits. Linda sighed, rubbing her temples. Greg, is this true? Greg's lips tightened. Well, maybe, not exactly. So you're making up rules? Grandma asked. You're harassing my grandson because you want his car. More murmurs spread through the crowd. Greg was losing them. He turned to Linda. In desperation. You can't just let this slide. The HOA has to act. Linda folded her hands. Greg, we are acting against you. Hiss. Face paled. What? Your complaints are unfounded. Your actions have been disruptive, and after tonight, we'll be discussing your continued involvement in HOA affairs. Greg stood there completely stunned. He had fought so hard to ruin me, only to destroy himself. Instead then, without another word, he grabbed his papers, stormed out of the room, and slammed the door behind him as soon as Ash was gone. Applause erupted. I had neighbors coming up to shake my hand, whispering that Greg had been a nightmare for years. Linda smiled as she approached us. I apologize for all this. Greg been overstepping his bounds for too long. She glanced at Grandma. You handled that better than anyone I've seen. Grandma smirked. Well, someone had toes. We left the meeting. Rachel grinned at me. So what? Now I smirked. Now was celebrate. The morning after the HOA meeting. Greg was nowhere to be seen. No smug looks, no yard work, just silence. That peace didn't last long. Though later that afternoon, I watched from my porches. Greg snatched a letter from his mailbox, read it, and turned bright red. He crumpled it in his fist before storming inside. Minutes later, Linda, the HOA president, walked by and smirked. Enjoying your victory? She asked. I chuckled. What was in that letter? Greg's officially stripped of his community advisor status. He's got zero say in HOA matters. Now I grinned. The same system he tried to use against me had finally shut him down that night. Rachel, Grandma, and I celebrated with a backyard barbecue. A few friendly neighbors joined, enjoying the absence of Greg's usual interference. But the best part. Grandma's victory lap as the sun set. I tossed her the keys. Go ahead. I said, you earned it. Her grin was priceless. She climbed into the Mustang, turned the key, and let the engine roar. The car peeled out of the driveway, Grandma behind the wheel, cruising through the neighborhood, with Greg watching helplessly from his window. Justice had never sounded so good.